Once again, it's on. You know what time it is. It's time to play some Toss. Welcome, everyone, to a special edition of Toss, but it's still episode 144 of the Tristain Sports Show. It is your main man, T-Square, Tristan Thomas, and it is a special edition of Toss because it's playoff time, folks. The NBA playoffs are finally here, and you know what we got to do. We got to make some first round predictions. We got to talk about the matchups. So while we get right into it, talk about these NBA playoff matchups. First of all, let's congratulate the winners of their respective play-in games. The Lakers getting the 7th seed out in the West. The Sixers getting the 7th seed in the East. Friday night, we saw the Heat get by the Bulls without Jimmy Butler to get the 8 in the East. And we saw the Pelicans roll without Zion over the Kings to get the 8th seed out in the West. So congratulations to those teams making it out the pit. That's play-in tournament. For those of you who don't know, that's what I affectionately call it, the pit. Because you got to fight your way out of the pit to get into that bracket. And those teams did so. But now that you're out of the pit, you find yourselves in some very tough matchups, some very tough brackets. And looking at these brackets, this is really the first time where I can say definitively, outside of, I'll say, one matchup, every single one of these series, and even that one matchup, I can't even say for sure that's just going to be a blowout. But all these series, both brackets, East and West, are going to be highly competitive, I believe. I really had to sit down and think about this. If you caught me earlier this week on Evan Witalason's show, Talking Sports with Evan, where you can go to his Facebook page, Talking Sports with Evan, catch the podcast wherever you get your podcast. You know that I had to sit down and really think about some of these matchups because I just didn't know. It's really, you can't even coin flip it. It's just that competitive. So let's get into these brackets. Let's go with the Eastern Conference. 1 seed, Boston Celtics, who are far and away the best team in the NBA from tip-off. Going up against, again, the newly cemented number 8 seed, the Miami Heat, who are without Jimmy Butler with an MCL injury. And he's going to be out for several weeks. So more than likely, he's not going to be a part of this series. Now, that being said, I've always said this about an Eric Spoelstra coached team. I cannot count out a Spoelstra, a Coach Spo coached team. He is a guy who does not get enough credit for what he does on the sidelines, moving the pieces, making adjustments, coaching those guys up on D. Always has them ready to compete, and they make things tough. And we saw that here tonight without Jimmy Butler, perhaps their best player. They're still able to roll past the Bulls. Now, it's not like the Bulls were some juggernaut, but they're still a professional team with an opportunity to get themselves into the playoffs. But no Jimmy Butler. You had to hope other guys stepped up. You had to put them in position to do so. And Coach Spo did exactly that. And that's why the Heat are number 8 seed going up against the Celtics. Now, with Jimmy Butler, this will be made much more tough. As I said before, when everybody's saying, oh, the Heat are not a good team this year, and they're swooning, I'm like, you are not fooling me about the Heat. This is what they do. They always kind of lay in the weeds and and they're never really seeming to put it all together. But then come around the 2 months before the season ends, and you're getting close to playoff time, they turn it up. And then they make a run. I was like, so you're not going to fool me again with this. But in this case, with a team such as the Celtics, the only way the Heat get by the Celtics is if Eric Spoelstra makes sure that they are uncomfortable trying to hit three-pointers. When the Celtics are not making their threes, they are struggling. And it affects other parts of their game. The three is so vitally important to the Celtics. If they are not hitting that, they do struggle. And they can be had. And if it's one thing that Coach Spo can do is make things difficult defensively, make you uncomfortable, make you feel them. But again, they're without Jimmy Butler. And can you really do what you did tonight against the Bulls, against the Celtics, across a 7-game series? I don't foresee it. And honestly, even with Jimmy Butler, yeah, it would be more competitive, but I just do not see the Heat winning this series. So obviously I've got the Celtics winning that 1-8 matchup in the first round. The 2-seeded New York Knicks earned that 2 seed on the last day of the season by winning their game and having the Milwaukee Bucks lose their final game, and we'll get to the Bucks in a minute. The number 2 seed New York Knicks going up against the newly minted 7th seed after winning their pit game, Philadelphia 76ers, with a not all the way there Joel Embiid coming back off of injury. It's kind of laboring, not really playing at the MVP level that he was before he got injured, and that's to be expected. He's still working his way back into things. With that being said, the other guys on that team, you talk about the Maxis, you talk about the Harrises, you're talking about the Oubres. Those guys are going to have to step up tremendously because Embiid is not 100%. Embiid is not going to continue to give you MVP performances, may not be able to give you MVP performances this first round while he's still trying to work himself back into shape, back into form that he was before he got injured. Who knows if he'll ever return back to that level this season? Because as I mentioned, he's been kind of laboring. The Knicks, are going to defend, obviously missing Julius Randle, which sucks. You wish he was there. Big, important part and piece of what they do. But they got Jalen Brunson. And more times than not, especially with an Embiid that's laboring, he's going to be the best player on the floor in a few games of this season, of this series. And Tom Thibodeau is a guy who, preaches defense. But the DiVincenzo's of the world and the Harts of the world, those guys are going to have to step up even more. This is playoff time. Brunson is a different player now than he had been in the past 2 playoff runs. But is that going to be enough to get by the Sixers? Nick Nurse is another guy who brings defense, preaches it, puts guys in a position to succeed in it. Talk about Sixers head coach, Nick Nurse. This is such a tough series, and it's very intriguing. And again, it was a possible series that we touched on Talking Sports with Evan earlier this week. I'm gonna go with the Knicks, but I would not be surprised if the Sixers pulled this off. If it's one thing that Embiid does is he gets to the free throw line. And yes, even though he is laboring, he can still hit a 3 for you. He can still get to the free throw line. He's been doing both of those things very well since coming back from injury. And with playoff time, more half-court sets, You got to believe that's going to happen. It's going to be more of an emphasis on that. So I believe the Knicks will eventually overcome that. But that could play a big part of the series. So officially, I'll pick the Knicks. But I would not be surprised if the Sixers pull this series off. That is going to be a very intriguing, very, very tough matchup. I foreshadowed this, and now we're getting to it now. The Milwaukee Bucks, the 3-seeded Milwaukee Bucks, against a team that they faced 5 times this season and lost 4 in the Indiana Pacers. The one game the Bucks won was a game in which Giannis scored his career high, 64 points, just an absolutely scintillating performance that night. Then we all saw what happened after the game. He blew his top, wanted to get that basketball. Rick Carlisle poking the bear. Oh, we gave it to the rookie because, it was his first. He scored his first NBA points in this game. Stop it. Some of the best teams in the league always have that one obscure team that just has their number inexplicably. This season, it's the Pacers for the Bucks. The Pacers have just had Milwaukee's number. There have been some really high-scoring games. Pacers won the season series 4-1. That includes the in-season tournament game out in Vegas. Bucks are likely to be without Giannis now. Everybody's playing coy. Doc Rivers isn't really giving a status report on Giannis, and he's trying to make it seem as if the door is still open for him to play. And I understandably, I see why. No one thought Giannis would be in any sort of condition to play Game 1 of the NBA Finals against the Suns. Yet he did. Bucks lost that game, but we know how that series ended. Bucks 1-6. NBA champions. First time in 50 years. So we know the superhuman nature of Giannis's healing. It's almost Wolverine-like. I see some of y'all scratching your heads. What do you mean, Wolverine heal? What do you talk about? The casuals. Wolverine's power is not adamantium. His real power is his healing power. And he had bone claws before he got fused with adamantium. But I digress. My point is, we've seen Giannis have some rather superhuman abilities with his healing factor. Now we're about 2 weeks since the injury? Or a week, a little over a week? The timing of this sort of injury, talk about a calf injury, soft tissue injury. Giannis has been shown to be a quick healer, but this close and the way he likes to play the game. Nevin said it best on his program. If the doctors give him any sort of clearance, he's going to be out there, and I do believe that. And even Doc kind of put those sentiments out there. Hey, if he's available, we're going to put him out there. And it's the playoffs. But do you want to really risk that calf turning it to something different? Turning it to something more? Kevin Durant being the first guy that pops in mind. He had that calf injury. He went out there. It was the NBA Finals. He was trying to push through it and ends up popping his Achilles. That's something that you just don't want to see for Giannis. But at the same time, you also don't want to see a first-round exit because that's very, very possible. That's a real possibility that's on the table. Indiana has had the Bucks number this season. The Pacers' speed Milwaukee up to a pace that they really don't like to play. And I remember it was kind of in reverse for a lot of years under Mike Budenholzer. They love to get out in transition. And that's not to say that they don't love to get out in transition with this team. It's just that they've become so much better in the half court that being sped up too quickly is not something they deal with very well. Now, a lot of that is with Doc Rivers coming in, and I wish they would get back to that transition ball. I wish they would get back to that free-flowing offense that they had, because they were right there with the Pacers as far as points scored. High-powered offenses. It's possible, Doc, you could have a high-powered offense and play defense. But all that's changed. The defense has gotten a bit better under Doc, but the offense has got much worse. The Pacers like to play, no pun intended, at a pace that is a little bit too quick for this Bucks team, and they don't like that. It bothers them. They're really not built to play like that. And it's really what's caused them all the trouble. Because you fall into the Pacers' hands. Okay, you want to play this sort of a game? Let's play. So this matchup worries me. And something tells me we're going to end up seeing, I said it in the regular season, something tells me we're going to end up seeing these guys in the playoffs. Bucks are going to see these guys in the playoffs. And that's exactly what happened. First round. That being said, and this may be my heart other than my head, I'll officially pick the Bucks. You got a relatively healthy Chris Middleton. I wish I could say the same for Damian Lillard, even though he did go through a full practice on Friday. But he's still dealing with injury. He's not 100%. His season's been different because he's had a lot going on off the floor. Multiple head coaches, multiple systems this season. It's just been very, very weird for the Bucks. The Pacers were able to do those things in those 4 wins out of 5 games with Giannis on the floor. Yes, it's the playoffs. Yes, regular season records account for nothing. But the style of play in which they got those wins in the regular season do count for something. Because it is more than likely the same game plan they're going to employ to beat you 4 out of 7. Literally, if the Bucks lose this series, the Pacers will have beaten them 8 times within the season. 8. Bucks really have to be on top of it defensively. They have to, if there is a switch, they have to flip it. Dame has to be more than what he has been in the regular season, and that's crazy to say because he averaged, 23, 24 points a game? Chris is going to have to take it up a notch, and that's not really a guy that I'm worried about taking it up a notch. What I'm worried about him doing is staying healthy. Beasley's got to be smart with his shot selection. What are the rotations going to look like from Doc Rivers? Will Giannis have any say in this series? A lot of questions going into this tough matchup for the Bucks against the Pacers in round 1 of the NBA playoffs. Officially, I'll pick the Bucks, but I would not be surprised if it is the Pacers that prevail in that series. I really would not be. Like I said, they just play a style that just bothers the Bucks, and they just can't keep up. So very, very tough matchup. 3 versus 6, Bucks, Pacers. Officially, I'll pick the Bucks, but Do not be surprised if the Pacers come out on top in that series. And then the 4-5 matchup, the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Orlando Magic with their collection of young talent led by Paolo Banchero. This is going to come down to who really defends. And the Cavs can do that. They got the players. They got the players to get it done offensively. Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, Darius Garland, Karis LeVert. I mean, they got the guys to go and get it done offensively, and they all can defend. Will they continue to do that? For me, the Magic, not this year, maybe next year. They're a young team. They're pretty much playing with house money. We made the playoffs. Don't get me wrong, they're a good team. It's just not enough experience there yet. And in the playoffs, that experience counts for something. So I'm going to go with the Cavs on that one. But to recap, Eastern Conference, Celtics over the Heat, Knicks over the Sixers, although the Sixers can win that series. I would not be surprised if they do. Bucks over the Pacers, although I think the Pacers could win that series. I would not be surprised. And the Cavs over the Magic. Let's switch over to the West, who many are considering the main event. I like all the matchups in both conferences, but this is really tough. Let's go 1 versus 8. The Thunder, OKC Thunder, against the New Orleans Pelicans, the newly minted 8th seed, winning their pit game Friday night, making it past the Kings. Got a feel for the Kings. You go 46-36 and you miss the playoffs. Pelicans were able to beat the Kings without Zion, and I was not sure if they would be able to do that, especially after the way the Kings defended the Warriors, knocking them out, eliminating them. I thought the Warriors would get by that because I felt that they were better defensively, but the Kings came through with a really good defensive game plan on the Warriors. Thought they might do the same thing against the Pelicans, especially without Zion, who's dealing with a hamstring. The only reason why I'm giving the Pelicans a puncher's chance is because they can defend. They're a good defensive ball club. I believe they were 7th overall defensively. But you're talking about a team that's top 3 defensively in OKC. Thunder, a collection of young guys led by their MVP candidate, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, SGA, Mr. Director of Basketball Operations or Creative Basketball Operations for Converse, signed that deal. Congrats to him. But you got guys like Dort. You got guys like Giddey. You got guys like Chet Holmgren. You got a lot of guys on that squad. A lot of young guys. Sam Presti and all his young guys and all of his still has draft capital coming out of his nose. Somehow he keeps just stockpiling it and hitting in the draft. That's a team that's playing with house money. Much like the Orlando Magic, but they're a step above the Orlando Magic. Good young team put it together this season, but inexperienced when it comes to this playoff stuff. But they earned the number 1 seed for a reason, and they had a dogfight to do so. The Nuggets and T-Wolves were nipping at their heels every step of the way. But they kept handling business. They kept winning. This is going to be a tough physical defensive series. And although they are young, although they are inexperienced, as far as playoffs go, I'm going to give that to the Thunder. It's going to be a now if Zion can come back, it'd be even more so close. But again, with hamstrings, those soft tissue injuries, those are tricky. You don't want to push it too much. But it is a playoff, so I understand why a player would want to get back on the floor as quickly as they can and just try to do what they can with it. Like I said, it sucks for Zion because he was relatively healthy all year, and you just saw how special of a player he can be. He's definitely the catalyst for New Orleans. But it's just something about the Thunder team, the way they defend and the way they can get after scoring at all three levels. I got to go Thunder. I got to go Thunder in that one. But I think that's going to be a competitive series. 2 versus 7. The defending world champion Denver Nuggets against their foe from the Western Conference Finals to get to that NBA Finals, the Los Angeles Lakers, who, again, won their pick game against the Pelicans to become the 7th seed. I'm going Nuggets. I'm going Nuggets. And it's not because I don't believe in the Lakers. I just feel like the Lakers went on that run last season to get to conference finals. And it just, I don't know. For some reason, it just doesn't feel that way this season. The Nuggets are playing fantastic basketball. They're on another level. They learned a lot throughout their championship run. They got through the Lakers last season to get there. I don't see any reason why they can't do it again. Jokic is more than likely going to win his 3rd MVP, playing at a very high level. I mean, that team is just really a well-oiled machine. Everybody knows their role, and they're playing as stars in those roles. The Jamal Murrays, the Michael Porter Jr.'s, the Aaron Gordons, the KCPs. Those guys are doing their jobs. And they're doing their jobs better than most anyone on the court. Just a well-oiled machine against a Lakers team that, man, when they decide to defend, you see flashes of that 2020 team that won it all. But the thing is, the consistency isn't there. They don't do it consistently enough. And it's the playoffs. You can't afford those inconsistencies. Every moment is magnified. But I feel the defending champs will get through that series against the Lakers. Again, going to be another competitive series. But I have full faith that the Denver Nuggets will pull through in that 2 versus 7 over the Lakers. 3 versus 6, the Minnesota Timberwolves against the Phoenix Suns. Phoenix winning their last couple of ball games to cement their place in the playoffs, staying out of the pit, pushing the Pelicans into the pit. But again, the Pelicans making it after winning their second opportunity in the pit. Very competitive series this is going to be. Now, you would love to see Cat within this series for the Timberwolves. I just don't know if that's going to happen. Timberwolves, another team that can defend. Another team that can defend. But who do you have that's really going to stop Kevin Durant? Is this going to be another one of those series like when Kevin Durant was in Brooklyn, going to give it to Milwaukee Bucks? Second round, Bucks just couldn't stop him. They let him get any and everything he wanted and stopped everyone else. Is that kind of the game plan that Chris Finch for Timberwolves head coach? Is that the game plan he's going to employ? All right, let KD go off, but we're going to stop Booker. We're going to stop Beal. We're going to stop anybody else that has any thoughts of trying to do anything. Anthony Edwards getting another opportunity to show how special he is. Think we'll see that this postseason run? I'm going Timberwolves. But I would not be surprised if the Suns win that series. If their big three come together, again, that's Booker, Beal, and Durant. BBD. If they come to play and they are truly the big three that we all believe they can be, does that overwhelm everything that Minnesota is trying to do defensively? It's going to be intriguing to watch over the course of that series, but I will officially pick the Timberwolves. But again, I would not be surprised if the Suns pulled that one off. And then the final series that we've got to go through. The 4 versus 5, the Clippers against the Mavs. Before, when Kawhi was playing and he was healthy, I was going to take the Clippers in no matter what matchup they had, first round. But Kawhi hasn't played in, I believe, the last 8 games. And there's some up in the air about his availability. I don't know if Paul George and James Harden are enough to get past the Mavs. I don't know. You got Luka and Kyrie Irving on the other side for the Mavs. Then they're role players, and that's really where this game is going to be won, because both these teams have players. Let's take Kawhi out the equation. If Kawhi's not going to be a part of a good chunk of this series, you're talking about they're two-headed monsters on both sides. Harden and Paul for the Clippers, Doncic, Irving for the Mavs. It's going to come down to your support. It's going to come down to your reserves, to your bench. Who's going to be that X factor that comes in and the other team has absolutely no answer for them? Who's going to step up and be that guy? If Kawhi Leonard does not play in this series, I got to go Mavs. I got to go Mavs, because we saw the story of the Clippers. Got off to a wretched start. That they made a trade for James Harden. And then they got even more wretched. But then they started to figure it out. And then they got hot. And remember, the important thing to remember within all that hot streak that they had was that Kawhi was playing every game. And at some point, people were saying, oh, he could be an MVP candidate. But then he started to miss games, and they started to struggle again. And then even when he wasn't missing games and they were all playing together, then they kind of struggled. I will officially pick the Mavs, but if they get any sort of Kawhi Leonard, the Clippers do in this series, for me, that's the guy that puts it over the top. And that allows the Clippers to get by the Mavs. Another competitive, intriguing series. And that's why when you look at all these matchups, top to bottom, it's so hard to predict anything. It's an inexact science, these predictions are. You look at everything that you've been given over the course of the regular season, but again, it's the playoffs. It's going to be very, very different. It's a whole different animal. So to recap, in the East, we got the Celtics, we got the Knicks, we got the Bucks, and we got the Cavs. And in the West, we got the Thunder, we've got the Nuggets, we got the T-Wolves, and we've got the Mavs. Happy playoffs to you all. Hopefully we get some really competitive matchups, because on paper, that's what it's looking like. But there's a difference between paper and the games, and that's why they play the game.